Chapter 41 Wolverine has heat vision, Donald is deeply terrified. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The fully armed gunmen surrounded the entire hotel and pointed their guns at the second floor. The quality of this group of gunmen is obviously not comparable to the dozen in front. Whether it is tactical movements or coordination, they are all benchmarked against elite troops, and the weapons they carry are powerful rifles. Taiwan Novel Network. Logan, you are asking for trouble. That with the arrival of reinforcements, Donald instantly gained confidence. He walked out of the room and raised his head to the second floor and shouted, an old guy with one foot in the coffin, still dreaming of being a hero, now hurry up and get out of here. Bang bang bang. In response to him, bullets flew out of the second floor window. This hotel has only 2 floors, and the second floor is paved with an open corridor. Even if Logan hides in the room, he can still counterattack the first floor. Hearing the gunshot, Donald's expression changed, and he subconsciously rolled over and hid behind the car. The bullet almost passed by his back. Donald leaned against the car door, huddled behind the car, and angrily shouted with a gloomy face, "You don't know what's good for you." After that, he waved his hand fiercely, "Kill him." Bang bang bang. At the command, all the gunmen pulled the trigger almost at the same time. The fierce gunshots like firecrackers resounded throughout the hotel, and countless bullets flew out. The windows were completely shattered, and the walls were covered with dense bullet holes, and the whole place was devastated. Damn, there are still a lot of them. In the room, Logan leaned against the window and said in a deep voice with gritted teeth. Bullets kept passing over his head, and he didn't even have the chance to raise his gun to fight back. As long as he showed his head, he would be shot into a sieve at any time. Laura leaned against the wall without saying a word. The anesthetic made her look very weak. Her limp body had no ability to move at all. But facing the rain of bullets, there was still no fear in her clear eyes. Gabriella stayed beside Laura, holding her head tightly and protecting her under her body. The harsh gunshot made her face pale and she said ashamedly, "I'm sorry, Logan, I misunderstood you before. I thought you were no longer Wolverine." A few days ago, she was discouraged by Logan. If it weren't for the last remaining belief in her heart, she would have fled with Laura again. At that time, she felt that Logan was an alcoholic who had been smoothed out. He was addicted to alcohol all day long, and life had destroyed him long ago, but now Logan is standing in front of her. Gabriella felt deeply guilty. Listening to the fierce gunfire outside, her face was ashen. She whispered, "Actually, Donald is right. You don't have to come." She had come to Logan with unrealistic fantasies. Now she saw the reality clearly. They would only become a burden to Logan. Instead of talking about this, it's better to save some energy to run away. Logan raised his head slightly and looked outside. Donald's people are indeed a bit too many. More than 30 well-trained heavy soldiers. Sending so many people here can be regarded as Donald's respect for himself. Of course, in the past, let alone this number of people, even if there were twice as many, it would be as easy as cutting melons and vegetables for him, but now is different from the past. His body can't stand the tossing for the time being. Logan took a deep breath, turned around and told Gabriella, "You just wait in the room, no matter what happens, don't come out." Gabriella frowned and wanted to say something, but Logan had already stood up, pushed open the eye-catching door, and walked out with his hands raised. "Don't shoot." Donald saw Logan's movements when he went out and hurried to stop the gunmen. The fierce gunshots dissipated instantly, and the whole hotel returned to peace. Donald raised his head and squinted at Logan with a playful look on his face, as if he was very happy to see this famous superhero crawling and begging for mercy to him. "Donald, let's talk." Logan came to the side of the corridor and kept observing the surroundings while talking. There were more than 30 gunmen in total. In addition to those arranged to attack in formation on the first floor, several people were assigned to completely block all exits. In this situation, unless they can fly, they can't get out by force. It seems that if we want to escape, we can't avoid a big fight. Logan muttered to himself, his hands still raised high, telling Donald that he didn't carry any equipment. "You bring Laura out first." Donald's tone was proud, as if he was sure of victory. He was very confident in his deployment today. In his eyes, Logan and his men were just trapped in a jar. Logan shook his head and said, "I'll go back with you and let Laura go. She's just a child. She comes from my genes. Compared with her, I'm obviously more valuable for research." Puff. Donald chuckled and said, "Logan, you think too highly of yourself. You're just a dying old wolf, and you still think you're young." In the past, Wolverine was a treasure to Project X. A trace of blood, even a hair, would have driven the group of biologists in white coats crazy, but now, the old wolf in his twilight years is just an alcoholic with wine flowing in his blood. Whether it was his proud self-healing factor or the X gene in his body, they were all lifeless waste. Now he was even worse than the incomplete X-24. How could such an old wolf be compared with the perfect X-23? So, there is no room for negotiation. Logan looked slightly cold. "What do you think?" Donald sneered. "You don't even have bargaining chips, why should I talk to you?" Buzz. "Since there is nothing to talk about." Logan put his hands down, took out his pistol and threw it down. Looking at the dropped pistol, Donald mistakenly thought that Logan was going to surrender, and his face was full of smiles, and he was about to step forward to arrest Logan personally, and at this moment, a dangerous atmosphere that made his hair tremble suddenly enveloped his heart. "Then help me tell Satan a message." A voice like a severe winter burst out from Logan's mouth. The next moment, the murderous eyes suddenly glowed with a bright red light, and the dazzling light was very clear even in the daytime. An extremely terrifying high temperature suddenly spread around the hotel, and the scorching temperature seemed to have instantly arrived in the depths of the desert. A few green plants on the railing on the second floor dried up, and the moisture in the air evaporated and white smoke rose. Before Donald could react, two red lasers suddenly burst out from Logan's eyes. Boom. The blazing beam of light carried an incomparable terrifying power, and even the space could not withstand the scorching heat and began to distort. Along with the high temperature came a terrifying energy that made everyone tremble with fear. Endless fear instantly echoed deep in Donald's heart. Chapter 42 Massacre. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Boom. The blood-red beam scattered an extremely strong aura. The indigo sky was instantly reflected by red light, revealing a red glow like the setting sun. The beam shot out, like a giant dragon burning with flames, rushing towards Donald. Fark. Looking at the speeding beam, the strong aura of danger instantly made Donald's scalp numb. He subconsciously rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the violent heat sight by a hair's breadth. The red heat vision was almost touching his shirt, slashing hard at the car parked behind him. Boom. A loud noise rose into the sky. I saw that the vehicle was instantly cut into two pieces neatly. The fractures were smooth and neat, and the high temperature instantly melted the iron sheet, continuously flashing hot sparks. Ah! This was also the first time that Logan released such a violent heat vision. An extremely hot white smoke continued to fill the corners of his eyes. The powerful recoil caused the heat vision that shot out of the eye sockets to rush wildly into the crowd like an out-of-control beast. As Logan shook his head slightly, his heat vision swept out, and several unlucky gunmen nearby were instantly involved. Before the violent heat vision could touch them, the clothes on their bodies spontaneously ignited without fire due to the blazing heat, and red rashes from burns on their skin quickly grew. Ah! The gunman roared in fear, and every inch of his skin seemed to be experiencing the heat of thousands of degrees. The fear of dying made them instinctively want to escape, but how could they be faster than their eyesight? When the heat vision swept across, the blazing high temperature and powerful momentum instantly shattered several people to pieces, and even their blood was completely evaporated. The rising blood mist filled the air, and the burnt smell continued to spread. Wherever the heat vision passed, no one could be seen anymore, only steaming pieces of meat on the ground. Fark. What's going on? The fear caused by the heat vision occupied Donald's heart. Even though the heat around him was filled, the cold sweat on his body was still flowing uncontrollably. The red light that he couldn't look directly at made him feel the trembling haze of death all over his body. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the source of the heat vision. Logan was standing on the second floor with smoke coming from the corner of his eyes. He has awakened a new ability. How is this possible? Donald's eyes widened. It was not uncommon for mutants to have multiple abilities. Their laboratory was also doing relevant research, trying to cultivate several mutants with several top abilities, but what shocked him was that Logan was already 200 years old. Even among mutants, he is already an old man, well past the age when the X gene is most active. Even after experimental modification, it is unlikely that his new abilities will be activated. What's more, his current physical condition has long since failed, and even the steel claws sometimes appear to be unable to be fully extended. Such a body function can be said to be completely useless. How can it be possible to stimulate new abilities? This strange scene made Donald completely confused. After a long period of shock, he suddenly came to his senses. His eyes suddenly became extremely hot, as if he were looking at a gold brick. I really underestimated you, Logan. You are worthy of being a Wolverine, even though he is more than 200 years old. It's still a treasure. Donald licked his lips, the greed in his eyes gradually overshadowed the fear, and he stared at Logan with salivation. Although the current Logan scares him, it is precisely because of this fear that Logan instantly rises from a worthless old wolf to an incalculable value. If he and Laura are captured together, he will receive an immeasurable reward. Boom! Just as Donald was thinking, the two beams of light like fire dragons swept over and instantly destroyed the gunman in front of him. The gunman's body exploded in an instant, and the sticky blood splashed directly onto Donald, and the broken flesh and remains were all over him. The sudden change completely interrupted Donald's thoughts. Only then did he come back to his senses and quickly turned his head to look around. Most of his more than 30 gunmen have now fallen. The heat vision was like a crazy red dragon, constantly twisting violently in the crowd. As long as anyone is slightly affected by the heat vision, they will either be directly torn in half, or they will be exploded by the terrifying power. Broken corpses and pieces of flesh were scattered in the yard, and blood flowed under the feet like water. Today's hotels are simply like an inhumane slaughterhouse. Wails of pain and roars of fear resounded throughout the sky. Damn it! Donald roared at the gunman who was already in disarray. No one can escape until he is killed. Shoot now! Bang bang bang. Only then did the grabbers remember to resist, suppressing their inner fear, and raised their guns to shoot at Logan. Ah! The whistling bullets formed a dense barrage, and Logan's body was instantly penetrated by several bullets. The pain that spread all over his body made him roar, but the killings did not stop. Logan gritted his teeth. The stinging wound made him angrier and his heat vision became more intense. The pervasive temperature climbed again. The beam was affected by the anger, the body became thicker, and the color gradually became darker red. Boom! As Logan shook his head, his heat vision swept around. The gunmen who were swept away exploded like inflated balloons. Even the rifles in their hands melted immediately, and the red molten iron kept dripping down. Damn it! Looking at the gunman falling down at a speed visible to the naked eye, Donald felt something was wrong and quickly took out his phone to call for support. Boom! However, before he could dial the phone, a red light flashed. The extremely terrifying high temperature swept over instantly. The blazing beam accurately shot at the phone, and in just a moment, the phone melted in his palm. The scorching heat burned his palm, and blood bubbles appeared visibly. The flesh on the palm quickly changed color and cracked, and was completely cooked. Ah! The severe pain from the palm made Donald scream heartbreakingly. He only had one hand, and the other arm was amputated due to injury and had long been transformed into a cold mechanical arm, and now, the only remaining hand is completely useless. At this time, the red light in the sky suddenly dissipated. Logan closed his eyes, and his violent hot eyes suddenly stopped. When he opened them again, his pupils had returned to their original state, and only the residual heat in the corners of his eyes was still rising with bursts of white smoke. He looked at Donald, who was screaming and screaming, with cold eyes. Bang! He turned over and jumped over the corridor fence, jumped directly from the second floor, stared at Donald with cold eyes, and pressed towards him step by step. Donald looked around, but after looking around, he found that none of his men survived, and there were body fragments everywhere. Looking at Logan who was walking like a killing god, fear completely lingered over Donald's head. He didn't care about the piercing pain in his arm, and hurriedly said, "Logan, don't be impulsive, we have something to talk about." Chapter 43 Death of Donald. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Let you go? Logan pressed on step by step, and said coldly, have you ever given me a chance before, that he could have put away his steel claws, stopped killing, become an Uber driver, a drunkard, and drifted on the sea with the professor, but these people forced him to use force again and again. It was all their own fault that caused the scene today. No, listen to my explanation. Donald's face was full of fear. He fell to his knees, and kept kowtowed to Logan, his head hitting the bluestone floor, making a dull sound of puffing, and blood flowed. He felt the strong murderous intent on Logan's body, which was a kind of coldness of the coming of the god of death. This old wolf, who once made him disdain, now has the strength to strangle him at any time. The haze of death loomed over his head. Boom! The red beam burst out suddenly, easily piercing Donald's head, leaving a bloody hole, blood and brain matter flowing, covering the face that was left with fear. Snap! The stiff body fell to the ground, and the gradually dilated pupils flashed with disbelief. So far, Donald was unwilling to believe that he had died like this, at the hands of a mutant who he thought was of low status. Who can let me go? Logan looked down at the body that had completely lost its breath, and murmured in a deep voice. Gabriella walked out vigilantly holding Lola, and saw the corpses scattered all over the ground, as if they were a dismemberment scene, and the flowing blood almost covered the entire courtyard. Her pupils shrank sharply, and she looked at Logan with her eyes wide open, her face full of shock. I can't believe that the old Logan can still have such terrifying strength. You saved Laura and Gabriella, and killed Donald. Prestige plus 10. Prestige plus 10. Logan had no time to pay attention to Gabriella behind him, and his attention was all focused on the new ability panel. The one-time increase of 20 points of prestige surprised Logan a little. Is this the bonus brought by the tribe? Logan couldn't help but look back at Laura, which made him more determined to find the tribe and build his own mutant power. Logan, did you do this? Gabriella was surprised and walked up carefully, tiptoeing for fear that her shoes would be stained with blood and corpses. Yeah. Logan nodded silently, not wanting to explain too much, looking around and said, let's talk about other things later, we have to leave here quickly. Dr. Rice will definitely not let Laura go easily. After all, he has been working for Project X all his life, just to replicate the perfect Wolverine. Now that Donald is solved, the next thing he will face will be a more fierce pursuit. Okay. Gabriella nodded and followed Logan's arrangement. She also knew that they couldn't stay in this place for long, and the people chasing them might come back at any time. The black Chrysler crashed into the wall of the hotel, and the front of the car was badly damaged and severely deformed. Logan got into the car and turned the key to try to start it. Fortunately, the stubborn car engine roared, and the violent collision didn't seem to have much impact, and it could still run normally. Inviting Gabriella to get in the car, Logan quickly turned the car around and drove out of the hotel. The fierce gunfight just now had already scared the people around and made them run away. All the shops on the street closed their doors, and the streets were empty and silent. Before the police arrived, Logan stepped on the accelerator completely and roared to the border of Santa Fe City. Rushing to the place agreed with Caliban, the desert wind blew, and the thick dust was filled. The yellow sand covered the tragic scene in front of the hotel. The black Chrysler broke through the dust and fog and disappeared into the horizon. At the border of Santa Fe, Caliban drove his old pickup truck and waited there. He was afraid of the sun, so he wore a white suit that covered him completely, a pair of sunglasses, and even put on leather gloves on his hands. He sat in the driver's seat and kept looking at the long road in the distance. 2 hours before the agreed time, he finally saw the familiar black car. Looking at the Chrysler with a severely deformed front, Caliban's heart was instantly lifted, and his hand slowly reached for the pistol in the drawer. It was not until the car approached that he saw Logan in the driver's seat and breathed a sigh of relief. Charles in the back seat also breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time he also noticed Laura in the black car, and instantly showed a loving face. It's the new mutants, the hope of our race. As his voice fell, the black car stopped next to the old pickup truck, and Logan got out with Gabriella and Laura. Caliban and the professor also hurried forward to greet them. Caliban looked at the two people behind Logan, his eyes full of vigilance, and said, Logan, who are they? This is Gabriella, this is. Before Logan finished speaking, Charles looked at Laura with a loving face and spoke first. Laura, we finally meet. Charles's behavior made Logan stunned. Do you know each other? I have communicated with Laura with my spirit. Charles reached out and rubbed Laura's head. She is our hope. Lola didn't speak, but didn't resist, just looked at Charles curiously. Okay, let's talk about these things later, we have to leave Santa Fe City quickly. Logan called a few people to get in the car. He didn't want other new changes to happen because of staying here. In the car, Logan said solemnly, let's go to Nevada to settle down first. Victor will be there. We can make plans after we get there. Neither Charles nor Caliban had any objections. For Caliban, he can go anywhere as long as it's not Santa Fe. As for Charles, he just needs to follow Logan and Laura. Gabriella in the back seat hesitated, hugged Laura next to her, and said to Logan, after you guys settle down, can you take Laura to North Dakota? There is a mutant organization there, where she can get asylum for other mutants. North Dakota has always been their goal, but with Donald's pursuit, they are unlikely to get there by their own abilities, so they find a way to contact Logan. Logan nodded, don't worry, I will get her there safely. Caliban on the side suddenly asked, from what I hear, you don't plan to go with Laura? Gabriella looked melancholy, holding Laura's head, placing her chin on top of her head, and said slowly, leave her to Logan, I will feel relieved. She believed that Logan was true to his word and worthy of being entrusted to her. After all, she was able to survive because of Logan's risking his life to save her. As for herself, an ordinary person is a bit weird among the mutant community, not to mention that she just wants to live an ordinary life. On the US-Mexico border, Gabriella got out of the car with a look of reluctance. She has a relative in Mexico. She can no longer stay in the United States and is unwilling to stay. She plans to leave the country directly to Mexico to inquire about the whereabouts of her relative. Logan did not force this. After all, Gabriella was just an ordinary person. The world of mutants was not suitable for her. She had her own ordinary life. Looking at Gabriella's back walking towards Mexico, there was even a little envy in Logan's eyes. An ordinary life was the life he longed for, but the name Wolverine was destined to completely separate him from ordinary. As Gabriella walked away, Logan started the car again. Dust and smoke are everywhere in the desert, and a black car is driving on a deserted road. Seeing the street sign on the border of Santa Fe City gradually disappearing in the rearview mirror, Logan breathed a deep sigh of relief. I'm finally leaving this damned city of Santa Fe. Chapter 44 Wolverine is still alive. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outside the hotel, corpses were covered with white cloth, and the blood stains oozing from the corpses stained the white cloth red and white. There were blood stains all over the bluestone floor, and some scraps of meat that couldn't be cleaned completely attracted a lot of blowflies. The strong smell of blood could be smelled even from across the street, and the tragic scene even made many police detectives who had seen the big scene couldn't help but feel their stomachs churn. Oh my God, what the hell happened? Steve Rogers opened a white cloth, and the hideous corpse made his pupils constrict. Scenes like this were rare even during World War II. There were more than 30 corpses, none of which were intact. They were either chopped into 2 pieces or directly bombarded into a pile of minced meat. The hotel is in disrepair and the surveillance equipment is no longer in use. We don't know what happened. An agent spoke helplessly. Initially, local residents called the police several times, saying that a violent fight had occurred. When the police arrived, only corpses were left on the ground. The local police knew that this could not be an ordinary gang fight. After preliminary exploration, they could determine that there was definitely a supernatural force involved. After many reports, S.H.I.E.L.D. was soon alerted. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are currently investigating all the details. The deceased are all mercenaries, but one of them is special. Natasha walked over and flipped the tablet in her hand, which displayed the information on the corpses. She selected one of the information. Donald Pierce, the head of a security company, is currently conducting experiments on Project X. Room work. X laboratory. Steve wondered. A biological laboratory. Natasha paused, looked up at Steve, swallowed the words in her throat, and changed her words. I don't know exactly what it does. Fury may need to check it out. After preliminary exploration, it may have been done by mutants. The cutting positions of many body parts are already ripe. Natasha looked at the corpses on the ground. The smell of burning corpses lingered for a long time. Mutants, that this unfamiliar term once again made Steve slightly stunned, frozen for 70 years, he missed the most glorious period of mutants, and in his time, the concept of mutants had not become popular. A human whose gene has mutated and has superpowers. Natasha shrugged, but they are almost extinct, and there are very few traces of their activities now. Before the freeze, I knew some humans with superpowers. Steve nodded understandingly, squatted down, and carefully inspected the corpses. After a while, he said, "It seems that the murderer is not weak. There are dozens of elite mercenaries, and it seems that there is no room for resistance at all." Steve has rich combat experience and can clearly deduce the strength of his opponent just by looking at the state of the corpse when it died. "Captain Rogers," Chris Lawrence confessed. Suddenly, an agent strode over. "Are you finally willing to recruit?" Steve stood up with a look of surprise on his face. In fact, the hotel massacre was just an interlude during his visit to Santa Fe, and his real mission was still those Chitauri weapons. As early as a few days ago, after Stark's monitoring device issued an early warning, they locked the Lawrence family's logistics warehouse and found the weapons there, and immediately arrested the warehouse manager Chris Lawrence. However, although the arrest process went smoothly, the interrogation process was full of obstacles. Steve had never seen someone survive being interrogated by S.H.I.E.L.D. for so many days. After several days, no information could be extracted from him. At present, they still don't know the source of the weapons and whether they have other equipment besides this batch, but this is understandable. After all, that guy is the local prince of Santa Fe City. He is used to covering the sky with one hand in Santa Fe City. He thinks that his local emperor father has the ability to recruit people from S.H.I.E.L.D., relying on this belief to be stronger. Also normal, but what he doesn't know is that the current Lawrence family is also in danger. The original partners saw that they had gotten into trouble with the special organization, and now they have all defected. They have withdrawn capital, withdrawn shares, financial disputes, etc., making Mr. Lawrence so busy that he had no time to recruit people. Of course, even if he had time, he wouldn't be able to take anyone away from S.H.I.E.L.D. And Chris's willpower has obviously completely collapsed under the continuous torture. "I'll leave this to S.H.I.E.L.D. for now." Steve spoke to an agent, and then quickly returned to the branch with Natasha. In the dim interrogation room, Chris had long lost his former energy and was slumped in a chair with bruises all over his body. The torture for many days made him look very depressed, his eyes were dim, as if he had no hope of life. Steve walked into the interrogation room, looked at Chris who was covered in injuries, and complained in a low voice, "Testimony obtained under torture cannot be presented in court for notarization." Natasha shrugged, "We don't plan to go through legal proceedings anyway." Steve was speechless and waved an agent to go forward and bandage Chris. "This is an important figure in this incident, and he cannot die." After the bandaging was completed, Natasha patted the table and asked, "Tell me, where did the weapon come from? Are there any more?" Chris raised his head weakly, with a look of exhaustion on his face. "It was brought by the Juarez family. After I learned the information, I sent someone to intercept the goods. It's just those 2 boxes. As for whether the Juarez family still has it, that's it. Go ask them." Natasha rolled her eyes speechlessly. "Wouldn't it be fine if I had said this earlier? Things that can be solved in one sentence have to be delayed for so many days." Chris didn't respond. In fact, he didn't want to expose the Juarez family, not because of his good relationship with the Juarez family, but because the Juarez family had channels for smuggling those weapons. He knew that those weapons were powerful, and as long as the Juarez family was not exposed, he could still go to Juarez to intercept the goods in the future, but the methods of these agents were too terrifying. If he persisted, he might really die on the interrogation table. After exhaling helplessly, Chris struggled and asked, "Can you let me go now?" "I'm afraid not yet." Steve shook his head sullenly. "You've committed more than just that." He had read Chris's file. As a local prince from Santa Fe City, this guy's behavior was full of misdeeds. If he opened any page, it would be a felony worthy of being shot. For example, in order to open a factory, the whole family of the residents on the selected site were killed. Loan sharking forced countless people to break up their homes and hang themselves, open underground casinos, trade in organs, abduct women, etc. The crimes were too numerous to list. You're out of luck. Natasha shrugged at Chris. S.H.I.E.L.D. may ignore these so-called evil bosses, but Steve will not. There is no room for crime in his eyes. Let me go, please. You should know that our Lawrence family is very powerful. As long as you let me go, you can give me the entire Lawrence family property. Hearing this, Chris completely panicked and begged with all his strength. He didn't want to stay in this damn place for a day longer. The torture of the madman from S.H.I.E.L.D. made even death a luxury. Steve just ignored these words, but there was still a question in his mind that was a bit difficult to solve, so he asked again, I have another question. More than 10 days ago, among those who intercepted the goods at the New York pier, there's a guy with steel claws. Who is it? Steel claw. Chris was stunned for a moment, then reacted, as if grasping a life-saving straw, and said quickly, it's Wolverine, Logan Howlett, alias James. Impossible. But when the word Wolverine hit her ears, Natasha immediately retorted, he's already dead. Since the establishment of S.H.I.E.L.D., they have also been very interested in Wolverine, who was famous in the last century, but they have not been able to find him. In these worlds, the only ones who can escape S.H.I.E.L.D. are the dead. It's really him, Chris said with absolute certainty. It's impossible to admit his mistake. Although that guy is a bit older, he is definitely Wolverine. Logan. Steve recalled, the familiar face gradually becoming clear in his mind. It's been 70 years, and he's still alive. Alive, really alive? Chris nodded repeatedly, and then quickly added, by the way, I know where he lives. I will take you there. Chapter 45. He is the Nazis' nightmare and a hero of the war. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Click, the door of the abandoned factory opened, and thick dust filled the air. Ahem, cough, cough, this doesn't look like a place where people live. Steve looked around, frowning. The dilapidated iron room is full of cracks, which lead directly to the desert outside. The transparent tape has become the only obstacle to block the wind and sand. The furniture looks equally retro. The old ceiling fan seems to be from 50 years ago, and there are some things left in the cupboard that have not been cleaned in time. A layer of green fungus has grown on the cooking utensils, and under the sun's rays, the room is filled with unbearable dull heat. This is simply a place that even homeless people would despise. It seems Chris didn't lie. There are indeed people living here, but they should have been gone for a while. Natasha saw signs that someone had lived in the room, and it was at least 3 people, which also proved that Chris had not lied to them. So Logan is still alive. Steve rubbed his eyebrows, thinking of his former comrade. Oh my God, if he is really alive, he would be at least over 100 years old. Do you really know him? Natasha turned to look at Steve. Steve nodded and walked in the room, looking at some details of the house. Natasha followed him. As far as I know, Wolverine did participate in World War II and killed many enemies. Many enemies? Steve suddenly smiled and said, it seems that your intelligence is not that accurate. The number of people that guy killed cannot be described as a lot. He is simply a killing machine on the battlefield. Steve touched the 2 holes on the iron table in front of him and couldn't help but fall into memories. He is the devil on the battlefield, the god of death that the Nazi bastards dare not sleep after hearing his name. After a pause, he suddenly remembered something, turned his head and asked in surprise, I'm a little confused. People like Logan will definitely leave a mark in history books, but why have I never written anything in any book? Have you ever seen his name in history books? After thawing, in order to adapt to this era, he read a lot of history books, trying to make up for his 70-year gap, but the word Logan did not appear in any history books. Natasha was silent for a while and said, Steve, you have been frozen for 70 years. Too many things have happened during this period. I will explain it to you slowly later. Natasha decided to avoid this problem. There were many things that Steve didn't necessarily need to know. However, Natasha's intentional evasion did not dispel Steve's doubts. I have to find Logan. There are too many mysteries about him. Not only were there issues that were not recorded in history books, but there was also the confrontation on the New York pier. He didn't believe that Logan would forget his old comrade, but why didn't he recognize him? Moreover, with Logan's ability, he would not live in such a dilapidated environment. As long as he wanted to, he could definitely become a respected superhero like himself, but why would he choose to live in seclusion? Perhaps only Logan himself knows the answers to these mysteries. Natasha saw Steve's persistence, paused and said, "The one with steel claws is not necessarily Wolverine." "What's the meaning?" Steve turned his head in surprise. Natasha thought for a moment and explained, "There are many mutants, and they all have various special abilities. They may just happen to be similar, and, the current biotechnology allows some people to master the abilities of other mutants. Maybe we will meet. That's not the Wolverine you know." After saying that, Natasha quickly changed the subject for fear that Steve would go into details. "Don't worry, I will let people track Wolverine's matter. Let's complete the task first. The top priority now is that you must investigate the hotel case. Killing Donald's mutants is dangerous and more important than finding Wolverine." Steve nodded, took a brief look at the factory, and then turned and left. Natasha is right. The guy who killed more than 30 gunmen is indeed an unstable factor that endangers society. We must find out something about it. As Steve walked away, Natasha in the room breathed a sigh of relief, walked to the corner of the room, and dialed a phone number. "Nick Fury, Wolverine has appeared, and he may have Professor X with him." It had been 2 days since Logan escaped from Santa Fe City. For safety reasons, he did not take the spacious highway. Instead, he bought a second-hand pickup truck and took everyone through the country roads. Although the condition of the trail is not very good, it can ensure that you will not be targeted, but the cost is to get to Nevada, which takes at least 3 days. It's getting late. Let's rest here for the night and hit the road tomorrow. In town, Logan parked his car in front of a hotel. This hotel is located in a remote location, surrounded by woods, and only hikers and cyclists stay overnight. "Where is this?" Caliban yawned, rubbed his eyes and looked out the window. "Linktown." Charles in the back seat read out the name, looked at the town outside the window, and said with melancholy, "It's such a nostalgic name." During the chat, Logan had already helped the professor take out the wheelchair from the trunk and patted Laura next to the professor. "I'll leave it to you, Professor. I'll rent a room first." Laura nodded, but said nothing. Since meeting until now, she has not said a single word, and even when she said goodbye to Gabriella, she only waved her hand, which made Caliban always think that she was mute. Logan didn't care. He booked a 3-bedroom at the hotel front desk and bought a few cans of beer. At this time, Laura and Caliban also pushed the professor to his side, and they went upstairs together. This hotel is a bit old and there is no elevator. Logan had to carry the professor to the second floor. Laura was responsible for the wheelchair, and Caliban was the easiest, with keys and beer. Although the hotel is old, the room is really good, with all the facilities complete, and even an LCD TV connected to the internet, without the sense of disrepair. "Caliban, go and give the professor a bath." Logan opened the beer and sat on the sofa. After drinking the cold beer, the fatigue of driving all the way was swept away. Laura on the side stared at the TV in silence. "Do you want to watch?" Logan noticed her eyes and her experience. In that laboratory, watching TV was probably an extremely luxurious wish. Laura nodded. Logan put down the beer, picked up the remote control and turned on the TV. The old movie The Wild One was playing on the screen. It was a heroic story, and even the picture quality was very retro, but the little girl didn't care. She held her chin up and watched with relish, and her eyes gradually became bright. Logan didn't bother her and drank beer quietly on the side. As the sound of water in the shower room ended, the professor came out in a wheelchair, noticed the TV screen, and said with a smile, "The Wild One, it's an antique I watched when I was young." But for Logan, this is a new movie. Caliban behind him teased that for Logan's 200 years old, even the first movie of mankind can only be regarded as a new product. Logan didn't refute this, but just drank beer and looked at Laura beside him quietly. The girl's eyebrows were very similar to his own. Although they had only met for a few days, Logan felt a little strange about this little girl. Perhaps this was the sense of inheritance in his blood. After watching for a while, Logan suddenly remembered something, retracted his gaze, and looked at the panel with a move of mind. Endurance, 6, Strength, 8, Agility, 7, Speed, 9, Intelligence, 5, Defense, 7, Willpower, 10, Fighting Skills, 7. Prestige, 30, Special Attributes, none, Special Abilities, Self-Healing Factor, Thermal Vision, Current Physical Condition, Gradually Stabilizing, Poor Condition. Free Points, 2, Enhancement Points, 5. Looking at the enhancement points, Logan was a little surprised. 5 points, there are so many. Chapter 46, Logan's Rejuvenation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The 5 enhancement points are the total number before, but the free attribute points are only 2, but he gained a total of 20 prestige points this time. You know, the prestige gained from Samuel and the 3 of them was pitiful every time, but this time it increased tenfold. This is the benefit brought by mutants, not to mention that there was only one mutant at the scene, Laura. The increase in free points and enhancement points is obviously linked to the prestige value obtained. The higher the prestige value, the more points can be obtained. When rescuing Laura, the 2 free points he used on speed had a very significant effect. If 10 points were added at once, the improvement would be a qualitative leap. If he could increase his speed infinitely, he might be able to surpass Quicksilver in speed. Thinking of this, Logan was secretly excited, and his desire for prestige increased again. At the same time, the idea of reorganizing the mutant organization has become more and more determined. Only in the mutant group can he maximize the prestige and benefits, gain the prestige value of the group, and enhance his own strength, so that he can completely get rid of the current predicament of being controlled by others. More importantly, Logan knows that the world he lives in will not be peaceful in the future. The Battle of New York has just passed, and there is still a universe overlord Thanos waiting outside. In the troubled Marvel world, you can't survive without some strength. Thinking of this, Logan did not hesitate to use all the enhancement points on the self-healing factor. Nowadays, the self-healing factor is definitely a top priority. Only when the self-healing factor is restored can the body survive various blows, can it have a chance to fight back. As all the enhancement points were used, Logan suddenly found that the pain in his body was significantly reduced. As he grew older, his body inevitably suffered from some geriatric diseases. Either his muscles became sore or his limbs swelled. In short, he became uncomfortable everywhere due to the decline in body functions, but now, these symptoms are obviously weakening. Although they are not completely improved, they are much easier than before. Current physical condition is gradually improving. The effect seems to be better. Logan murmured secretly in his heart, subconsciously clenching his fists, contracting his muscles and then relaxing them, feeling the changes in his body. Including this time, he spent a total of 8 enhancement points on the self-healing factor. The effects of the first few times were not obvious. Logan did not feel any substantial changes. Apart from coughing less, the rest did not help at all, but this time, his body seemed to be relieved, and his breathing became smoother in his chest. Perhaps the reason is that the enhancement has reached a certain critical point. Before the critical point, no matter how many enhancements are made, the changes that can occur will not be too great, and once it exceeds the critical point, it will be a brand new transformation. Just like prestige points, new abilities will be activated after reaching a certain threshold, but now Logan cannot determine the specific values of these critical points. Logan, your hair. Caliban's sudden shout interrupted Logan's thoughts. He pointed at Logan's head with a look of shock on his face. Hair? Logan touched it subconsciously and asked in confusion, what's wrong with my hair? There seems to be a lot less gray hair. Charles also noticed the change in Logan, pushed his wheelchair in front of Logan, touched Logan's hair, and looked surprised. The reaction of the two made Logan a little surprised. He quickly stood up and walked to the mirror, carefully pulling the messy hair on his head. After the inevitable decline of age, his body developed many characteristics of the elderly, including these hairs. At first, it was just the temples that gradually turned white, then some of the hair in front of the forehead gradually changed color, and finally the number of white hairs could even compete with that of black hairs. In addition, there are wrinkles on his face. The deep wrinkles make him look really old, but now, these white hairs have turned black again. Except for the temples, which are still gray, the other hair on the head has returned to black, and even the hair is shinier than before. There are also fewer wrinkles on the face, and the loose skin is gradually returning to its original tight appearance. If you just look at his face, he is at least 10 years younger at this time. How is this done? Caliban came to the mirror and looked up and down curiously. Not only Logan's hair and face, but also the skin on his arms had changed. Some age spots on his arms were fading quickly, and his muscle lines gradually became clearer. Forehead. Logan didn't know how to answer for a while. After a moment of silence, he said, "I don't know either, but I can feel that the self-healing factor is gradually recovering." Professor. Caliban looked back at Charles. Is this normal? Now Logan seems to be gradually completing the signs of rejuvenation. Although he only looks 10 years younger, if word spreads, it will definitely be a medical miracle, and this situation is unique even among mutants with special abilities. Charles also had a look of astonishment on his face at this time. After looking at Logan for a long time, he couldn't help but exclaimed, "Incredible, incredible, Logan, this means that your self-healing factor is evolving on its own. Oh my God, the X gene can still complete self-evolution even if it is suppressed. Logan, if the Academy still exists, I must study your genes carefully." Charles pushed the wheelchair to Logan, looking very excited. Such a spectacle, how could he not be excited as a person who has studied the X gene for a lifetime? You know, the X genes of mutants in the old era were all suppressed, and some people with weaker X genes have completely become ordinary under such suppression. It is also because of such suppression that Logan's self-healing factor cannot function normally, causing Logan to age rapidly in the past 10 years. However, the self-healing factor in his body is undergoing self-evolution to counteract the genetic suppression. At the same time, as it evolves to a certain extent, the ability of the self-healing factor also reappears and begins to repair Logan's damaged X gene. If it continues to evolve, it will only be a matter of time before Logan completely recovers to his peak. Chapter 47 Hunting Season. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Professor, why is this happening? Caliban looked at Logan curiously. He even envied the changes in him. Everyone wanted to be younger. Maybe the healing factor has adapted to the new environment. Charles looked at Logan and made his own guess. There is no inspection equipment now, and he doesn't know what the reasons are for these changes in Logan. After a pause, Charles suddenly said seriously, "But in any case, you have to pay attention in the future. The changes in the X gene must not be known to others. The X gene has changed, and it has changed in the famous Wolverine. This is heavy news for any laboratory that studies the X gene. If it spreads out, the hunt they encounter will be 100 times more serious than it is now." Logan nodded. He naturally knew this, so he would not use the thermal vision unless it was absolutely necessary. After talking for a while, Logan looked out the window. It was already night, and it was pitch black outside the window. The stars began to scatter starlight in the night sky. He picked up his clothes and walked into the bathroom. He needed to take a shower. After running around for several days, he was full of sweat and stench, and his sticky body made people feel extremely uncomfortable. But when he turned on the shower, he found that not a drop of water flowed out. Logan patted the water pipe, but it didn't work. "It seems that the water is out." He frowned and walked out of the bathroom. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden movement at the door of the room. Dong dong dong. Several people turned their heads and stared at the door in an instant. Caliban even reached for the pistol. Now their crisis is not resolved. Maybe hundreds of people are chasing them. Everything must be done with extreme caution. Logan walked to the door and looked out through the cat's eye vigilantly. After finding that there was only a middle-aged man at the door, he opened the door with confidence. "Hello, sir, my name is Jack, the son of the owner of this hotel." As soon as the door opened, Jack introduced himself with a smile. Logan looked at Jack, frowned and asked, "What's the matter?" Jack smiled awkwardly and said, "I'm very sorry, there is a problem with the water pipe in the store, and now the whole hotel is forced to temporarily stop water. This matter should be handled by our hotel staff, but my father's legs have some problems. You know, the elderly always have some minor ailments in their legs and feet, which is really inconvenient to travel, but I need someone to help me. I wonder if you are willing to help me, sir. After a pause, Jack finally added, it doesn't need to be too troublesome. Just go a few kilometers away to replace a small section of the water pipe, and it will only take half an hour. Logan thought about it and nodded in agreement. After all, he finally got a night's rest during his escape, and he didn't want to have no water to take a shower on this rare night. Jack nodded gratefully. Then let's go, thank you for your help. After that, the two went downstairs, took the shotgun and toolbox, and walked into the night together, passing through a forest. Are you here to travel? Jack turned on the flashlight and asked sideways. Yeah. Logan looked at the dense trees around him and said, nonsense, my name is James. My father's lifelong wish is to go to the north. Before he died, I decided to fulfill his wish. My brother and my daughter are traveling with me. I really envy you. Jack smiled and said, then sighed and said with a little regret, I also want to travel, but there are too many things at home. Time is squeezed out. Logan shrugged and chuckled. We can't squeeze it out. Jack looked helpless. My family has lived here for generations and has been running the hotel for more than 20 years. My mother died a few years ago, and my father's legs and feet are not good. The son and daughter in the family are not easy to deal with. My wife and I have been exhausted over the years. Logan was stunned for a while, looking at Jack, with some emotion in his heart. The other party's life is exactly what he asked for. Instead of fleeing around the world with a group of people, sighing, Logan smiled bitterly. Sometimes a happy family is more important than any beautiful scenery. Your current life is envied by many people. Jack smiled, bang. However, just as the voice fell, there was a sound of heavy objects hitting the side, accompanied by a burst of animal calls. Not good. Jack was shocked, and hurriedly pulled Logan to squat, quickly turned off the flashlight, hid behind a tree, put his finger in front of his lips, signaled Logan not to speak loudly, and whispered, it's a wild boar. Wild boar? Logan was a little surprised. Jack nodded. Wild boars are very common here. They always like to run into the town. Over the years, they have smashed many shop windows and even injured people, making the people in the town anxious. Later, someone organized a hunting season, and the number of wild boars decreased, but they still appear frequently. These guys are extremely irritable. It's not good news to be targeted by them. While speaking, Jack held up the shotgun and paid attention to the surrounding movements. After waiting for a long time, he made sure that there was no movement, and then he stood up and said, it seems to have run away, let's go. Logan nodded and followed Jack. Their destination was the dispatch room in the forest, where water was diverted from the main pipeline to each household. As soon as the two arrived, Logan noticed that the pipeline had broken, and a large amount of water was gushing out of the pipeline, splashing continuously, forming streams on the ground. Seeing this, Jack hurried into the dispatch room and turned off the water valve, and the splashing water pipe stopped. Looking at the broken water pipe, Jack said helplessly, this should be the government's job, but the water source government in Link Town never repairs it. Those guys only collect money. Even if we find government officials, it's useless. They will only use various methods to tease us. As he said, Jack squatted down, opened the toolbox and asked Logan to help, remove the broken pipe, and then replaced it with a new one. In order to ensure that the town can use water normally, most of the time it is the sheriff and I who repair these pipes. Sometimes we have to come in the middle of the night. While installing the new pipe, Jack couldn't help but complain, damn, if the government department doesn't care anymore, I don't think we have to pay the money. As he said, the water pipe was assembled, Jack reopened the valve, and the newly replaced water pipe worked normally, and water flowed back to the town. Perfect. Jack looked at the repaired water pipe with satisfaction and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Bang. However, as soon as the voice fell, a wild boar suddenly ran out in the night. The wild boar, which was raised by all kinds of debris in the woods, looked very big. Its sturdy body was like a big bucket, and its black fur was almost completely hidden in the darkness. The wild boar waved its limbs and rushed towards Jack. Jack was frightened by the movement in the dark and fell to the ground, and the whole person was in a panic. With the speed and size of the wild boar, Jack would definitely be injured if he was hit. Looking at the flying wild boar, Jack was horrified and had no time to react. He could only stare wide-eyed. Seeing that the wild boar was about to hit Jack, Logan kicked out in a flash. Whoop! The wild boar let out a dull roar, and its abdominal cavity instantly sank. The more than 150-pound body instantly flew up, completing a perfect parabola in the night and landing heavily. Chapter 49, Pursuit and Favor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Call, Logan gasped for breath. The bloody steel claws were dripping with blood in the dark night, and the night light hit the steel claws, reflecting bursts of cold light. He turned to look at Jack. The situation was urgent just now, so he subconsciously stretched out his steel claw. It only solved the wild boar crisis, but a bigger crisis may be approaching due to the exposure of the steel claws. Logan looked at Jack aside, only to see a surprised look on his face. With a look of joy for a few minutes. You are a mutant. You know about mutants? Logan frowned. In this era, mutants were a topic that only a few people would talk about. Certainly. Jack looked at Logan's steel claws, his eyes shining brightly. When I was a kid, I often heard about your deeds. Logan thought for a moment, sighed and put away the steel claws, nodded, looked back at the vast night, and said, "Go back first, it's too dangerous here." No one knows whether the gunfire just now will attract more dangerous guys. Jack also nodded repeatedly, but before leaving, he glanced regretfully at the wild boar carcasses on the ground. These are all good things, but it's too dark now and it's a big trouble to deal with, so I have to give up. Arriving in town, Logan returns to his hotel room. The professor had gone to bed at this time, and Laura and Caliban were sitting on the sofa watching TV. As soon as he entered the door, Caliban noticed the blood on his hands and asked nervously, "What happened?" "I heard gunshots just now." "Did those guys catch up with us?" Laura's round eyes stared at the blood on Logan's hand with worry. "Fine." Logan shook his head, walked into the bathroom and washed his hands, and said at the same time, "We just killed a few wild boars that attacked us." After washing away the blood stains, he wiped the water drops on his hands and said, "We have to get out of here." Hearing this, Caliban quickly looked over. After all, in the escape life, being able to sleep comfortably in a hotel for one night was a rare treat, and he was not willing to give it up. "Are you causing trouble again?" Caliban couldn't help but ask. Logan shook his head. "It's a little troublesome to explain. We have to go to Nevada quickly." With that said, he threw the toilet paper into the trash can and quickly packed up his luggage. He couldn't be sure whether Jack's reaction when he found out his identity just now was a pretense or a sincere one. After all, there are too many smiling tigers like Chris. They may look admiring you on the surface, but they may have been calling you secretly. Call the police. For safety reasons, he had to take Caliban and the others away overnight. Logan cleaned up the room, went to the room to wake up Charles, turned off Laura's TV, and told Caliban behind him, "I'll go down and drive, and you will bring the professor and Laura down later." After instructing Logan, he quickly went downstairs. Just as he reached the top of the stairs, he suddenly noticed a lot of light flashing through the hotel door. A number of black commercial vehicles stopped in front of the hotel. A group of guys who looked not to be trifled with were walking with heavy footsteps. Walking into the hotel, Logan quickly retracted his body and stood at the foot of the stairs, leaning against the wall. There was a rough voice in his ears, and someone asked Jack at the front desk, "Have you ever seen a bearded man?" He brought an old man, a girl, and an albino patient with him, and his face was as white as a sickly man. Logan's heart tightened at the entrance of the stairs. It was obvious that the group of people were coming for him. He carefully clenched his fists, slowly extended his steel claws, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "No." Jack's decisive answer made Logan slightly stunned. He didn't expect that the other party would actually help him. After all, mutants are now wanted criminals, and the pursuit of harboring mutants is also not small. If you don't believe me, you can go up and see for yourself. Our hotel didn't receive any guests today. Jack's voice came again, as if those guys didn't believe Jack's response just now. Logan quickly turned around, ran back to the room quietly, and carefully closed the door. Caliban, who was packing his things, looked stunned. What's wrong? Someone is catching up. Logan opened his mouth to explain, and at the same time quickly stuffed all the luggage they brought under the bed, decorating the whole room as if no one had been there. Caliban understood the seriousness of the matter and quickly stepped forward to help. After restoring the house to its original state, Logan looked around, opened the closet, carried Charles in, and said to Laura and Caliban, "You guys come in too, don't make any sound." Laura nodded very cooperatively. And Caliban got into the closet, not forgetting to grab a pistol for self-defense. Fortunately, the wardrobe is big enough to fit 3 people. After closing the closet, Logan quickly turned off the lights and leaned against the door, putting his ear against the door and listening to the sounds outside. After a while, there was a sound of footsteps outside. Logan squatted behind the door alertly, his eyes cold and his fists clenched. At the same time, Jack was holding a bunch of keys, leading the way in front of several burly guys, using the keys to open one door after another. "I told you, there is no one here." Jack's impatient voice came, "After looking for so many rooms, you should believe what I say. Are you looking for this one too?" Okay, wait, I'll look for the key." There was a sound of keys ringing, and Logan knew that Jack was deliberately stalling for time. Logan quickly ran into the back room, quickly closed the door, and listened carefully to what was going on outside. The door opened and Jack turned on the light. After the group of people simply glanced at the living room, they no longer wanted to waste time here and turned to check the next room. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, there was no movement outside, and the sound of a car starting could be heard downstairs. Logan quietly walked to the window sill, opened the gap in the curtains, and let the professor and others out. After making sure that the cars were far away, several people sat on the sofa and breathed a sigh of relief. "Were those Dr. Rice's people just now?" Logan asked Laura. The girl remained silent, but nodded affirmatively. Logan frowned and cursed, "Those guys are really haunting, that I didn't expect that they would find my whereabouts so quickly. They really have a dog nose. We have to leave here." Caliban spoke worriedly. What happened just now made him feel scared. After all, he didn't have much combat power. On the contrary, his ability to chase mutants would make him a sheep falling into the wolf's mouth. Dong dong dong. At this time, there was a knock on the door. The people who had just put their minds at ease became alert again. Caliban hurriedly raised his pistol and stared at the door closely. Logan also walked over carefully, looked out through the peephole, and found that only Jack was standing outside the door. Then he waved his hand with relief, signaled Caliban to put down the pistol, and opened the door at the same time. "Don't worry, they're gone." As soon as he opened the door, Jack smiled at Logan. Logan nodded gratefully, "Thank you. You saved my life, this is what I should do." Jack shook his head, looked at the people in the room, and suddenly smiled. "My wife made a lot of food, I need you to help me get rid of those delicacies. I wonder if you are free." Logan knew Jack's good intentions, nodded and said, "I'm very happy, I'll talk to them." He turned to explain to Caliban and others, "If we set off now, we may run into Dr. Rice's bastards. They have just searched here and will not be back in a short time. It's safe for us to stay here." Caliban hesitated, and Laura remained silent. Charles smiled and said, "Then let's go have a meal together. I'm hungry." Chapter 50. It turns out he is an X-Man. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There is a single-family villa next to the hotel, which is where Jack's family lives. The villa was much livelier than usual tonight, and the dining table was full of people. Jack introduced his family to Logan and the others, his father Mr. Bill, who looked about the same age as Charles and was also in a wheelchair, and his wife, Miss Helen, who is busy in front of the stove, has curly black hair and looks a little fat. There was also a son on the table who seemed to have just grown up, and a daughter who was about the same age as Laura. The whole family welcomed the arrival of Logan and his friends, and warmly invited them to sit down at the dining table for a meal. the dishes on the table use very simple ingredients, but they look very thoughtful and even carefully presented. After everyone was seated, Miss Helen served soup for everyone and prepared snacks for Laura alone. Don't be restrained, just treat it as your own home. Helen smiled and said to everyone, I hope you will be satisfied with tonight's dinner. Thanks. Charles nodded to Helen in a gentlemanly manner, cut a piece of pork chop into his mouth, and said with a look of enjoyment, they are very delicious. No need to thank me, old gentleman. Helen sat down in her seat and said gratefully, it's your son. He saved my husband and our whole family. The woman looked at Logan and thanked him, thank you. When I heard Jason say that he was surrounded by wild boars, I was really scared. I didn't feel relieved until I was sure that he was not injured. In that situation, I was actually trying to save myself. After all, I was also one of the wild boar's targets. Logan smiled. No. Jack looked certain, those wild boars will not pose any threat to you. Even if you don't expose your abilities, you can still survive, but you chose to save me. He knew the current situation of mutants, and exposing his abilities in front of others would definitely cause big trouble, but even so, Logan still chose to save himself. Logan smiled and said, in fact, you also saved me and deceived those guys. You also saved our lives. Kind people will always be rewarded with kindness. Jack smiled and pointed at the plate, eat quickly, my wife's cooking is the best in town, you should really try it. Logan nodded and started eating. He noticed that Laura on the side looked up from time to time, with joy in her eyes. The girls seemed to like this scene very much, also, with good food, good wine and the company of family and friends. Such a harmonious scene made Logan feel warm in his heart. Halfway through eating, Jack's father, Mr. Bill, suddenly smiled and said to Logan, when Jack was very young, mutants saved his life. Mutants carried him out of a fire. He explained with a smile, but decades have passed since this incident. Jack was only 5 years old at that time. It was such a long time ago that my memory of that period has been a little blurry. Since then, the deeds of mutants have suddenly become rare. A lot. Logan looked at Jack with slight surprise. He didn't expect that his family had such a deep connection with mutants. Jack smiled and nodded, although I was young at the time, I remember it very clearly. At that time, they called themselves the X-Men. Unfortunately, they did not tell me their names. He sighed, it's a pity that the X-Men and the mutants disappeared together later, and no one knows where they went. Logan and Charles looked at each other and remained silent. Then Jack took the initiative to drop the issue and chatted with a few people about home affairs. Everyone was very satisfied with the meal, and Laura was very happy to eat it. After the meal, she went to watch TV at the invitation of Jack's children, and Laura also had a rare smile on her face. And Charles talked to Mr. Beale about things from the old days, and the memories of many eras made people nostalgic and laughing. Logan's expression was suddenly in a trance. He looked at Helen who was refilling Kata's food, the happy Charles, Laura and the other children, and he felt an indescribable enjoyment. This kind of scene is really like a family gathering for a weekend dinner. He can forget about hunting and hiding his identity and enjoy a pleasant leisure time like a normal person. Dinner lasted until late at night. Logan and the others returned to the room. After taking a shower, he lay on the sofa and could not fall asleep for a long time. Charles suddenly came out of the room in a wheelchair, looked at Logan's appearance, and said with a smile, I guessed that you were not asleep. Can't sleep. Logan simply sat up from the sofa. Charles pushed the wheelchair and walked up to him, because of Jack's words. Probably. Logan said with some emotion. I didn't expect anyone to remember the X-Men. He thought that he had been completely forgotten by the times, and that the glory of the X-Men would never even be mentioned by future generations, but now Jack's memories of the X-Men made his heart tremble, and he was even a little moved. That's a very distant name. Charles's expression gradually became sad. If it weren't for me, maybe all the tragedies wouldn't have happened. X-Men Scott Hank. Seeing this, Logan quickly reached out and patted his shoulder, comforting, I don't blame you, the government will deport us for any reason, no matter what we have done. Charles let out a long sigh and suddenly smiled. Speaking of it, tonight's dinner seems to be exactly what it was. I was even in a trance, feeling like I was back to my normal life before. Logan smiled, patted the professor on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, there will be a day, but it's late now, you should go to bed." Charles nodded and let Logan push him into the room and put him on the bed. "Good night, Logan," he said to Logan, who was leaving. "Good night." Logan closed the door gently. Back on the sofa, he took a deep breath, and his eyes suddenly looked at the comics that fell out of Laura's school bag. There was a page with an X-Men comic poster, and standing in the middle, the most eye-catching, was Wolverine wearing a battle suit, with one foot on a boulder, his hands clenched, and his slender steel claws reflecting cold light in the sun. Logan picked it up and looked at it for a long time, and carefully cut off the page. The next morning, Logan and his friends packed up their things, declined Jack's idea of keeping them for a while, and moved their luggage into the car. Jack stood at the door with his family and waved goodbye to them. As the car disappeared on the horizon, Jack turned back to the hotel, pushed the cleaning cart, and opened the room where Logan and his friends had lived. A comic on the table just after entering the door instantly attracted him. A comic poster of X-Men, with Wolverine's steel claws in the lead. "Is he Wolverine?" In an instant, Jack's eyes widened suddenly, and he strode to the window to look down, but the car had already gradually moved away.